The notification glowed at 2:14 in the morning. Sasha Merritt hadn't been sleeping anyway. She'd been lying on her side of the bed. Her side, always her side. Even though half the mattress had been empty for 3 weeks now because Brendan had taken to working late and crashing at the office. Staring at the ceiling and listening to the particular silence of a house where someone used to be. His Apple Watch was on the nightstand. He'd forgotten it when he left that morning. And she hadn't texted him about it because she'd been busy. And then she hadn't texted him about it because something small and quiet in the back of her mind had told her to wait. The screen lit up on its own. A message preview. Just enough words before it dimmed again. Can't stop thinking about last night. You were then, nothing screen dark. Sasha sat up slowly, the way you do when you're not sure your legs will hold you. She picked up the watch. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. Everything inside her had gone very still. The way a lake goes still right before a storm, not calm, just eerily deceptively flat. The sender name was listed as K. She set the watch back down exactly where it had been. Then she went to the kitchen, made herself a cup of tea she wouldn't drink, and sat at the island counter in the dark, thinking about the last 8 months. Brendan Merritt was the kind of man who made a good first impression everywhere he went. Charming at dinner parties. Remembered the names of waitstaff. Coached his nephew's hockey team on Sunday mornings, which Sasha had always found quietly endearing, even now, even knowing what she knew. He was 39, a civil engineer with a government contract in Ottawa, and he had a laugh that came easily and meant nothing. They'd been married 11 years. They had a house in Westboro with a back porch they'd built together, a gray cat named Archie who slept on the heating vent, and a shared calendar on their phones that still had Brendan office late, blocking every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 5 months. Sasha was 37. She ran the communications department for a mid-size environmental nonprofit, which meant long hours, a lot of grant reports, and the particular satisfaction of work that felt like it mattered. She was the kind of woman people described as composed, measured, the one who kept her head. She had kept her head for 37 years. She was very tired of it. After that night in the kitchen, she didn't say anything to Brendan. She didn't confront him. She didn't move the watch or leave it somewhere accusatory or do any of the things you see in movies where the wronged wife makes her discovery dramatically known. She went back to bed. She waited. Over the next 3 weeks, Sasha paid attention in a way she hadn't in years. She noticed that Brendan had started locking his phone face down. She noticed that he'd changed his passcode. She only knew because she'd tried the old one once, casually, while he was in the shower, pretending she needed to check the weather app. She noticed that he'd begun coming home, smelling faintly of something that wasn't his usual soap, something slightly floral and foreign, and that he'd started taking his gym bag directly to the laundry room, instead of leaving it by the door like he had for a decade. She noticed that he still kissed her cheek when he left in the morning, every single morning. Without fail, that was the part that made her feel the coldest. She didn't hire anyone. She didn't need to. Brendan had always been careless in the comfortable way of men who've never had reason to be careful. He left email confirmations in the shared inbox they still used for household bills. A reservation for 2 at Becta, a restaurant downtown that he'd never taken her to. A thank you email from a hotel on Murray Street that began with "Thank you for choosing to stay with us," and listed 1 room, 2 nights, a parking charge. The reservation at Becta was for a Friday evening 2 weeks out. Sasha looked at the date for a long time. Then she called her sister, Nadia. Sasha's younger sister, sharper and louder and exactly the kind of person you wanted in your corner. Came over on a Thursday night with a bottle of wine and the specific energy of someone who had been waiting to be angry on your behalf for years. "How long have you known?" Nadia asked. "A few weeks. Maybe longer if I'm honest." "Are you okay?" Sasha thought about it. "I keep waiting to be sad. I just keep thinking." Nadia looked at her across the kitchen island. "What are you going to do?" "I have a lawyer." Sasha had called 3 days after the watch. Marianne Beauchamp, recommended by a colleague, who had sat across from Sasha in a glass-walled office in Centertown and gone through everything with the calm precision of someone who had heard this story before. "She says I'm in a good position. The house is half mine. The savings are documented. He spent quite a bit on her, on hotels and restaurants, and I don't know what else. It's all there good." Nadia refilled her glass. "What else?" Sasha smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile exactly, but it was a real one. "I need a favor." Her name, Sasha eventually learned, was Kira. 26 years old, worked in procurement at a firm that contracted with Brendan's department. They had been seeing each other for approximately 8 months, long enough that she had apparently begun asking, with some frequency, when Brendan was going to say something to his wife. Sasha learned this not through any dramatic confrontation but through Brendan's own Gmail, which he had left logged in on the shared family iPad that sat on the counter in the kitchen, Because in 11 years of marriage the worst secret he'd ever kept was that he'd backed into their neighbor's car and not left a note. She didn't read all of it. She didn't need to. She read enough to understand the shape of it. Kira asking questions, Brendan making promises, Brendan failing to keep them, Kira growing frustrated. One email from 2 weeks ago in which Kira had written flatly, "You need to make a decision, I'm not doing this forever." Sasha closed the iPad and put it back on the counter at exactly the angle it had been. She thought, "You're right, he does need to make a decision," she thought, "but I'm going to make it for him." The reservation at Bekta was for 7:30 on a Friday. Sasha had been to Bekta once, years ago, for a colleague's retirement dinner. She remembered it well, the low lighting, the elegant room, the kind of service that was attentive without being intrusive. She called them on a Tuesday afternoon, asked to speak with the manager on duty, and explained that she was trying to arrange something. It was delicate, she said. It required discretion. The manager, a composed woman named Helen who seemed to understand immediately that this was not a strange request, told her it could be arranged. Sasha also called Marianne Beauchamp, who had the papers ready by Thursday, and she called Nadia, who showed up at the restaurant at 6:45 in a dark coat and sat at the bar with a glass of Riesling, positioned with a clear view of the main dining room. "You don't have to be here," Sasha had told her. "I know," Nadia said. "I want to be." Brendan arrived at 7:22 with a woman who was, objectively, young and pretty, and who laughed at something he said as they came through the door. Kira wore a green silk dress and small gold earrings, and she touched his arm when the host led them to their table. Easy and familiar, the gesture of someone who had done this before. Sasha was not in the restaurant. This was deliberate. This was the whole point. She was parked 2 blocks away in her car with the heat running and the radio off. Her phone was face up on the passenger seat. She was wearing the gray wool coat she'd bought in Montreal 3 years ago, the one Brendan had said made her look like a senator. At 7:31 she got a text from Nadia. "They're seated. Ordered drinks." At 7:48, "They're laughing a lot." She's touching his hand. At 8:07, "It's happening." What happened was this: a server approached the table. Not their server, a different one, carrying an envelope on a small silver tray. He set it down in front of Brendan with a quiet word. "Sir, this was left for you at the front." Brendan looked at it the way you look at something that doesn't make sense in context. He picked it up. He opened it. Inside was a note in Sasha's handwriting, brief and clean. "I know everything, I've known for a while." The papers are underneath, and beneath the note, folded once, were the divorce documents that Marianne Beauchamp had prepared. Not theatrical, not annotated with accusations, simply the legal reality of where they were, what Sasha was asking for, and what she was not willing to negotiate on. Brendan went still in a way Nadia described later as complete. Not the dramatic frozen stiffness of a man caught in a lie. More like a man who has just understood something and found that the understanding has taken all the sound out of the room. Kira, who had been mid-sentence, stopped talking. She looked at his face, then at the papers, and something shifted in her expression, a kind of dawning that moved through her features slowly like weather. "What is that?" she asked. Brendan didn't answer. "Brendan," her voice was different now, lower. "What is that?" He set the papers on the table between them. He still hadn't said anything. Nadia reported that Kira picked up the documents, skimmed the first page, and put them down very carefully, as though they might catch fire. Then she opened her bag, took out her wallet, placed 2 $50 bills on the table without counting them, stood up and walked to the exit at a pace that was not quite running but left no room for doubt about her intentions. She did not look back. Brendan sat alone at the table for 4 minutes. Nadia timed it, with the papers in front of him and his wine untouched and the main course cooling on the plate. Then he took out his phone and called Sasha. She let it ring. He called 3 more times that night. She didn't answer. He came home at 11, and she was in bed with the light off and Archie asleep at her feet. And she lay very still and listened to him move through the house. The sound of the kitchen tap, the particular creak of the 3rd stair, the long pause outside the bedroom door. He did not come in. In the morning, when she came downstairs, he was sitting at the island in yesterday's clothes with coffee he hadn't touched. And when he saw her, his face did something complicated and unrehearsed that she suspected was the first genuinely unguarded thing she'd seen from him in months. "Sasha, I've already talked to Marianne," she said. "Everything you need to know is in those papers. You should get your own lawyer. I'd suggest you do it this week. Can I explain?" "You don't need to explain anything to me." She opened the fridge and took out the oat milk. "I'm not angry with you, Brendan, I'm just done." He stared at her. "You're not angry?" "No." She poured her coffee. "I was sad for a while and now I'm not that either. I just want to get through this cleanly and move forward." She looked at him. "That's going to be easier if you cooperate." He didn't have words for that apparently. He sat there while she drank her coffee, and she let the silence be what it was. Not hostile, not tender, just the particular quiet of an ending. The weeks that followed were not clean, because endings never are. Brendan did not cooperate, at first. He went through the phase where he wanted to talk, then the phase where he wanted to negotiate, then the phase where he called her at odd hours from a number she didn't recognize, as if she wouldn't know his voice. He sent a long email at 1 a.m. on a Wednesday that she forwarded to Marianne without responding to. He told his mother, who called Sasha and cried on the phone, in a way that was almost enough to make Sasha feel guilty, almost, and then she remembered the hotel receipt on Murray Street and the email from Kira and the Apple Watch glowing at 2:14 a.m. She did not call his mother back. Nadia came over on a Saturday and helped her box up the things in the hallway closet that were Brendan's: hockey gear, old tax folders, a jacket she'd never seen him wear. They worked efficiently and without ceremony, and when they were done Nadia made eggs and they sat on the back porch in the October cold with their coats on and didn't talk about Brendan at all. "What are you going to do with the house?" Nadia asked. "Keep it," Sasha said. "It's half mine. I built that porch with my own hands." Nadia looked at her. "You're going to be fine." "I know," Sasha said, and she did know. That was the strange part. Not confidence exactly, more like clarity. The kind of thing you find on the other side of something you were afraid of. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in late November, in a Centertown office tower that smelled like printer paper and old carpet. Brendan signed without meeting her eyes. Sasha signed with her own pen, a good one, the kind she'd bought herself when she got her current job, and she didn't feel triumphant or sad or anything dramatic. She felt like someone who had just finished a very long project. Marianne handed her a copy of the documents. "Congratulations," she said quietly, and it was the right word actually. Kira, as it turned out, did not escape consequence, not through any action of Sasha's, but through the ordinary mechanics of cause and effect. Brendan's department had a conflict of interest policy regarding relationships with contractors. Someone filed a complaint. Sasha never knew who, though she had her suspicions about a colleague of Brendan's who had disliked him for years. The investigation was quiet and took 2 months and resulted in a reassignment for Brendan and a terminated contract for Kira's firm. Sasha heard about it from a mutual acquaintance who'd mentioned it at a holiday party, casually, the way people mention things they think you already know. She nodded and said nothing. She thought, what goes around? She got herself another glass of wine and went to find Nadia. Spring came early that year. By March the back porch was dry enough to sit on, and Sasha had taken to working out there on weekends when the weather allowed. Laptop balanced on the old wooden table she and Brendan had bought at a garage sale in Almonte, which she'd since sanded and restained a darker color. Small acts of reclamation. She had started running again, something she'd let go of somewhere in the middle of the marriage. She ran along the river path in the mornings before work, past the bare trees and the gray water, and gradually the runs got longer, and the mornings felt less like something to get through. She didn't think about Brendan much. When she did, it was without heat. More like remembering a version of herself she'd been before. The one who'd kept her head and given him the benefit of the doubt and lain awake at 2 a.m. listening to the house without knowing quite what she was listening for. That woman had been careful and patient, and had built a life she'd thought was solid. This one was building a different kind of solid, less about holding things together, more about knowing what was hers. Archie followed her from room to room in the mornings now, more attentive than he'd ever been when there were 2 of them. Cats, she thought, always knew. He'd slept on her side of the bed for the last 2 months of the marriage, she realized. He'd known before she did. She told Nadia this on a Sunday morning, standing in the kitchen in her running clothes, still a little breathless. Nadia laughed. "The cat was smarter than both of you. The cat was smarter than both of us." Sasha agreed, and she laughed too, really laughed, the kind that came from somewhere unclenched and free. And outside the window the Ottawa River was dark and running fast with snowmelt. And through the kitchen glass the light was the particular thin gold of early spring. And Archie was winding around her ankles, and that was enough. That was, she thought, exactly enough.